minutes already. Okay, so I'm going to talk about DevOps in defense, and really want to give you an overview of what DevOps really is, because some people think it's about automation and stuff like that. I'll talk about me in a minute, but I just want everybody to stand up. We're going to play some games first. I saw the ping pong out there, and Ed was really rubbish at it. So, everybody stand up. So stay standing if you're in an agile environment. You use practices of agile. Okay, some waterfall-y people sitting down. Okay. Oh, wow. All right, stay stand up if you're in a DevOps environment. Oh, okay, some people know the difference between agile and DevOps. That's good. Stay standing up if you're in a product team who build and support the product. Ooh. Wow. Wow. Okay. And stay standing up if, whilst preserving stability, you perform multiple deployments per month. Right? Okay. Multiple deployments per month. Okay. Multiple deployments per week. Multiple deployments per day. Whoa. All right. That's pretty freaking awesome. Right. Okay. 2 deployments a day. 3? 10?
It depends how many builds there are, and we've got loads of environments. Is this the same environment?
So you can do deployment. You can do it. You're doing it on demand, kind of thing. Yeah. So what have you got up to?
We use Octopus deploy to roll out our builds. We've got TFS, VSTS, right. Everything we can possibly do to automate the deployment of these releases.
Right. Wow.
Test management, that sort of thing.
Okay. Good. Round of applause. Ross, well done. Good. That was really good. That was a big experiment. I didn't know how that was going to go down. This is only the second time I've spoken, so you could probably tell. I was going to do the whole DM on Twitter kind of thing, but I think the throwing the microphone box thing is probably a better thing to do, so forget that. And it's World kind of Mental Health Week, International Mental Health Week Day, today. So it's really, and that's really important because a big part of DevOps and creating the right environment is all about kind of psychological safety, and all the stuff to do with Westrum's psychological models and stuff like that is all about creating like the base foundations. You've got food and water, you've got psychological safety, you then end up going towards purpose and self-actualization, which is all the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So really good that falls on the same day. And I won't steal any of Ed's thunder later. Sorry, Ed. So a little bit about me. I do want to walk around, but the light keeps shining in my eyes. So I was born in Wales, so I am Welsh. If anybody wants to hear my Welsh accent later, it's pretty freaking awesome. Sounds slightly Indian. I grew up in Grimsby. I lived a couple of years in Kenya, and I live in Preston, so I'm a northern kind of guy. You can tell by my accent. I spent 20 years in BAE Systems, so I've done everything from aircraft maintenance systems. I went into supply chain logistics systems, and then I went into like management stuff, so strategy, marketing, all that kind of stuff. I ran a mini data center. It was more like a computer room, but ended up with hot and cold zones. We introduced blades, all the kind of networking, ripping all the cables up, putting them all back in again. I think I went in and my engineers had all the floorboards ripped up. I was like, why is it all going to be plugged back in by Monday morning? And they were like, yeah. And then they took all the boxes of all the equipment, all the new servers and stuff, and made a big ship for me in my office, like a big cardboard ship, which my boss completely missed as he walked past it. I got into IT project management. I became a business systems manager. And then kind of sort of 2012-ish, 2014, I was the enterprise IT service manager for BAE Systems. So I looked after networks, hosting, desktops, all the back office applications, about 80 of them. And then my boss at the time, he was the IT director, he read a book called The Phoenix Project. Who's read The Phoenix Project? Yay. If you haven't, you need to read it. There's a lot of content coming up from that. And he said, let's do this small experiment. Why don't we do this thing called DevOps? I was like, all right, yeah, I'm up for that. Says, you're going to have to get rid of half of your organization and half your budgets and all that. I said, I'm not bothered about that. Let's play. So he says, we'll take our enterprise SAP environment. This is a small experiment, by the way. Our enterprise HR system, and this is 40,000 people we're talking about, enterprise service management, and our enterprise SharePoint platforms, and let's practice DevOps. So I took those 4 teams, and then I became the head of product delivery, and I'll talk about the story there. I left there at a point where my part of the organization, my systems were outperforming the business. IT was no longer a bottleneck. It was the value enabler to the business. And I left because the business turned around and said, you know what? You need to slow down. And so I've kind of, the other thing was as well, I'd practiced everything I knew in an environment that I knew, and I wanted to go and kind of spread my wings. And those of you who've read the Phoenix Project, I wanted to go from being Bill to being Eric. So I'm now Eric. And I need to look at Eric's clothes a bit better. But so I've been 2 months at DevOps Group. This is my second talk, and hopefully you find value. Somebody's going to stop me, by the way, when I run out of time, so hopefully I keep to that. I've got 3 children. I've got and a dog. This is Carlia. She's currently pregnant. She's been bred with a 7th generation Sprocker. So if anybody wants a puppy, DM me. I've got use for the DM now. Right, so the world's changing, and it's really great because the author of the Phoenix Project, Gene Kim, and a colleague of ours at kind of DevOps Group, he said that high-performing organizations, such as the ones you've seen here, use these techniques that we now call DevOps. It's an unfortunate title, I think, as well, and we'll come on to that in a bit, because it's more than just Dev and Ops. And they're deploying hundreds or even thousands of production changes a day, a bit like Ross, and whilst preserving world-class reliability, stability, and security, right? That's the balance here. It isn't just about going fast. It isn't just about doing loads of changes. It's about doing that in a safe environment where your production environment stays stable. And that's the kind of thing where Dev are turning around saying, look, my job here is to make changes, to add new value. And Ops is like, stop destroying my environment. I want it to be stable. And it's bringing those two kind of different paradigms together. And it's, we've done this by instituting a set of cultural norms, processes, practices, and we're seeing organizations having breathtaking performance. And there's a little bit we'll talk about in the State of DevOps report by Accelerate, just saying that there's not only kind of low, medium, and high performers, there's now the elite performers. There's people just pushing away, accelerating beyond the rest of the pack. And all of this is down to kind of culture, which predicates IT performance, which predicates business performance. And all this stuff about, every business now is a software business. Every modern business is a software business. And, your software business is knowledge work. How many times do you get interrupted today, every day? How many times does Slack pop up, your email pop up, somebody turn up? Creating a culture where you're allowed to be psychologically safe and have the time and focus to get into deep thought, get into flow, and do the stuff that Richard was talking about earlier is really, really important. We're not people now who work on a manufacturing line who just do the same thing every day. So creating the right culture drives the right performance, which drives the right business outcomes. Now, a bit of BAE Systems. So it goes back, beyond 1910, and there's all of these various organizations, some of them flipping huge organizations. I think there's Marconi somewhere in there and BAC, and they all came in to create this British aerospace organization, and then we had the merger with Marconi. A bit later on, we bought Detica, which is a cyber intelligence wing, and BAE Systems going forward. So if you can think about it, it's like 80,000 people sat in this organization, all with their own cultures inside the organization. So if you go to the dockyard at Portsmouth and then you go to the hangars in Wharton, completely different cultures. And that was the challenge. That was a fight we had to fight with. But I'm not taking anything away from the ways and practices of BAE Systems, because they do some pretty awesome stuff. And I like the fact that I've got this slide behind me. Have you got a picture of this? This is cool, right? That's a proper unstable aircraft. The only reason it can fly is because of the software, and it's lack of stability that gives it agility, which is kind of a contradiction in terms, but it's amazing. Queen Elizabeth carrier, this is flipping things huge. You know, it shouldn't sail. I don't know what sail, float, whatever boats do. And if you go to Portsmouth Dockyard, I mean, there's something like a 5-meter gap either side of the opening of the harbour, you know, when this thing comes out. They have to shut the whole channel down when this thing moves. It's phenomenal. It took about 10 minutes to sail past that in my friend's little dinghy thing that he had. And then, you know, we've got the guns, and, you know, these things need to be towed. These are huge. And, you know, Type 45 destroyers, you know, and they can go patrol the oceans and, you know, take all sorts of weather and environment. F-35, the new vertical takeoff aircraft that we built with BAE Systems, built with Boeing, and I think we've just received 35 as, you know, a UK government. And, you know, submarines that can just, you know, sit silently underwater for like decades without needing refueling or oxygen or anything, you know. And, you know, just creating one of them without it leaking, you know, several thousand feet under the oceans is pretty awesome. So, you know, the work that's been done, all the stuff to do with kind of the Industrial Revolution and, you know, all our technological revolution has created some of the most amazing technical capabilities on the planet. But it just didn't work. It just didn't work for IT. You know, the same processes. I was governed, the same processes that were used for building and supporting a submarine were applied to IT. Just didn't work. And, you know, my life was the beginning of the Phoenix project. You know, I was trying to run services. I was the ops guy. And, you know, projects would keep turning up and destroying my systems. And I'd be running support, early life support, under major incident mode. It was horrible. But, you know, we changed that, and we implemented DevOps practices. And over the 3 years, we saw some significant improvement in performance. Now, the State of DevOps report in 2016 talks about kind of the difference between high performers and low performers. High performers would deliver 200 times more changes than low performers, have 22% less unplanned work, and we all hate unplanned work, you know, incidents and requests and all that sort of stuff, and, you know, twice as much morale in the organization. So we did the experiment, and over, you know, that 2 or 3 year period, we saw a 300 times improvement from when we started to when we finished. So we were deploying 300 to 400 times a month in enterprise-wide production applications. We saw a 35% reduction in unplanned work. Because the teams built and supported the product, they were like, well, why are we getting these incidents? Let's get rid of them. And if a support engineer is sat there getting rid of incidents, what's he doing? He's, or she? They're getting rid of their job, aren't they? If there's no support incidents, there's no job. And if developers finish their code quickly and the project ends, they're like, well, what's the next project? You know, all of that psychological safety, all those worries that you have when you're doing your work. Well, you put them into a product team and you go, you know, if I get rid of incidents and I'm a support engineer, I can get involved in building value, you know. And if I'm in a product team and there's an incident and I have to fix it, oh, how boring is that? You know, so I'm going to build my code better. And then the flip side is, if I'm, you know, a developer now and I'm building code, it's not like I'm going to finish a project and move on. I'm sticking with this team. I'm sticking with the product. And the product owner's goal is just to keep bringing more features in. And my goal as an engineer now is actually to come up with new ideas, to present to the business and say, what if we did this? The whole experimentation stuff. And as a result, you know, I saw the morale of my team go up by twice. Now, there's a whole bunch of other metrics, which I'll talk about later, but things like customer satisfaction went up. You know, one of my teams, our highest rating for customer satisfaction was a blue, and one of our customers just gave us like 7 blues in a row, 7 months of blues, to the point where at the beginning of this year they said, we're going to have to just re-baseline. You're still awesome, but we're going to give you a green just to set the bar even higher. And when your customers are happy, guess what? They'll ask for more stuff. They'll pay for more stuff. And it's really interesting. The stats is the stats. That's great. You know, well, so what? You know, you can do some deployments. But in the cyber division, we transformed their business. They were losing £1 million a month. That's a lot of money to lose. So halfway through last year, they said, we're going to change our operating model. We're going to change what we focus our products on, which markets we focus on. But guess what? We need to change SAP, Salesforce, SharePoint, all the bespoke applications that was running at the time, so all the .NET stuff, and Cognos, all at the same time, all with the January 12th go live. And you can't change January 12th, which, do you know what? I really like. Fix the deadline, fix the budget, and we'll work out what we do. We vary the scope, which is exactly what we did. But we did just enough to transform that organization, and we opened SAP one day early. And we went to the vendors, we went to the people who think they know what they're doing. No vendors here, hopefully. And they said, no, we can't help you with this. You're going to have to do this on your own. This is impossible. To do that transformation in 3 months with all the data migrations, all the data cleansing, you know, all the new structures, financial structures, marketing structures, everything, it was impossible, but we did it. And each one of these teams had a different variant of doing, you know, some did Scrum, some did Kanban, some did Scrumban, you know, and trying to bring all of that together without doing scaled agile or safe or anything, because we didn't know anything about that, was quite amazing. For enterprise IT services, we deployed ServiceNow, and it wasn't just a case of deploying ServiceNow, but twice a week we were releasing new features. And we were just optimizing the platform, and it just felt like if the shareholders have bought licenses in ServiceNow, we should be using just about every piece of capability it has to offer. And I still know, you know, organizations that takes 9 months to deploy something from ServiceNow. That's ridiculous. We were doing it every couple of weeks. And then HR services, we brought in SuccessFactors, or it was a waterfall project to bring SuccessFactors in. They spent a lot of money. They deployed it. It was a bit of a mess. And then we spent a couple of years stabilizing the platform, removing all the technical debt, getting back to vanilla, because projects tend to like to make everything more complicated than it is. And then we were just deploying on demand, you know, new features that were helping, you know, transform the way we do HR. And for me, I think this all comes down to 3 things. This is the Flux Capacitor of DevOps. I wrote a load of articles, I'll come on to that in a minute, but one of them is the Flux Capacitor. And I think the whole thing of DevOps is about 3 things. It's about leadership. It's about having the right leadership. If the leadership are just kind of the old-fashioned traditional leaders, which we'll come on to a bit later on, command and control kind of leaders, they won't create the right environment. But if they're gardeners, if they're about creating an environment that allows people to grow, then they're going to create the right environment for high performance. And there's a huge amount that I'm going to talk about later. We need the right culture. You need the culture of openness, the culture of sharing, culture of, you know, collaboration. You need the culture of experimentation, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. And you need the engineering excellence. So you need to be building, you know, excellent product. And, you know, if you start thinking about, you know, Facebook's deployment mechanisms or Spotify's, you know, chaos, you know, things, because there's lots of them now. There's a King Chaos, isn't there now? Have you heard about that? Chaos King? King Kong? Something like that. But basically, instead of just switching servers off and services off, which Chaos Monkey does, Chaos Kong, I call it that, but it's something like that, switches whole data centers off randomly. It's like, whoa. And the level of engineering that goes into that, the amount of time you need to give the engineering people in the organization just to think through these really hard, complex things is super important. So what do I want to get out today? This is Lara Croft. You're going to see lots of these kind of, you know, cool images done by our excellent media team. Just get that on camera, just so brownie points for me. But I'm going to talk about people, environment, practices, and customer, right? And so there's a whole bunch of themes I'm going to talk about. So, you know, talk about the people, the roles, leadership, the environment in terms of tools, you know, thinking about value, flow, quality instead of time, cost, and scope, and then getting into the practices and the anti-patterns of DevOps, and really, you know, what is this digital transformation thing really? And a little bit of an Iron Man link in there. All of what I've said is on my, it's on my LinkedIn. I wrote a number of articles. They're all kind of superhero related. I've done some on the Insanity Fitness program as well. So kind of bringing these themes alive with stories, which, you know, we all relate to. So feel free to go in and have a look. And I've put my kind of, you know, handles on the bottom there. But first thing is, origins, transformation, the change curve. I think one of my favorite stories is the Spider-Man one, where he gets bit and suddenly he's feeling a little bit queasy, and then his muscles start growing, and his vision starts improving. He doesn't need the glasses, and next thing he knows, he can like climb up walls and swing through the streets of wherever. And then he's recognizing, I've got some skills here. A bit clumsy, but I've got some skills. And then it's like, I'm going to go. I really fancy. What's the girl's name? Is it M? Mary Jane. MJ. That's it. So thanks. And so what he does, he goes into competition. Wrestling competition. He wants to win a car. He sort of wins that, but in the whole process, his uncle dies, and he goes into this like massive rage. He wants justice. He wants revenge, and then eventually he realizes that his powers can be used for good, and he just gets bigger and better and stronger. Unfortunately, at the same time, all of these villains turn up with even like bigger and meaner skills to try and take him on. But that whole journey of kind of realizing something, when we get out of bed or when we have a big change in our life, you go through that kind of denial, this isn't really happening, and then you get into this, oh my goodness, what's happened? And I'm kind of feeling a little bit like that as I've joined DevOps Group. I'm going through that change curve from working in a big enterprise to a small startup. But then you get into that, right, okay, I'm accepting where I am now. I understand where I fit. I know, what my role is, what my goal is here. And then you start, accelerating out of that. And that takes time. And giving people time to go through that transformation is so important. And how many times are there initiatives for new tool sets and new capabilities or whatever that goes on in the organization, and they forget the fact that people need to go through that curve. And that's, a really important thing. And when I was challenged through, our transformation and my personal transformation from going from command and control to kind of gardener kind of leadership, my boss turned around one day and said, what do you need? And I said, I just need time. My team need time just to go through this. And it's really hard. And we all want to give up. But, we're going to make it through it, which we did. And it's really important, that whole traversing the change curve. You need to understand that you need to go through that change curve. You're going to go through denial, blame, uncertainty, acceptance, problem solving, and moving on. And for me, it was, I needed the right help when I did it. We all need the right help. So we had some education through a company called Imogen at the time, who taught us about value, flow, quality, kind of reset the patterns of our brain. Jamel Qureshi, he's a performance coach. He talks about you think, you feel, you act. You have to change the patterns and the pictures in your mind, engage your emotional being in terms of you feel like you want to do something different, and then you do something about it. And we had mentors. So for me, I had my own Eric. My teams had an Eric, and it was the DevOps group that came in and kind of just sat alongside my teams and kind of helped coach them and did the whole Eric thing, which was like, why are you doing that? What is the work? Where's the work coming from? Where are your bottlenecks? What's your constraint? Why are you doing, 5 whys all the time? And they really helped. And to be honest, it's interesting that, I was listening to our founders yesterday talking. It's more like marriage counseling half the time than it is, consultancy. Sometimes it's that relationship between dev and ops. For me, it was like, I'm going through a big curve, and every Thursday I had the call with the DevOps group, and half of it I was like, I just want to give up. I can't do this anymore. This is too hard. I think I was in tears once. There's something about mental health and tears and stuff like that, so I'm okay with saying I cry. There's a film I cried at recently. It was the Lion film with the little boy who grows up. Anyway, and then transformational change. Really, and we're going to go into that with Ed's talk later on about surviving, digital transformation. You're going to go through suffering, but you need to be patient, and that patience brings character, and that character brings hope. And, this whole thing, what's the point of that story if there's no depressing, sad, angry, whatever? If everything was happy and flowery, you wouldn't have a superhero story. So be prepared to go through your story, because the best ones are when things in the middle are really, really bad, and then they become really, really good. And this whole thing about stories, and Damien Hughes does this talk about stories, and he works with Barcelona, and he worked a little bit with a few rugby clubs and things like that. And he talks about everything has a story, and he used the Finding Nemo one, which was something about father and son love story under the sea. That was the title. So for me, mine was like not quite, but maybe Google-like performance defense environment. And what was the story? And the story comes in 6 stages. Once upon a time, every day, one day something happened. Because of that, something happened. Because of that, there was an outcome until finally. And my story was one day, once upon a time in BAE Systems, stability and change was a trade-off every day. And then one day, we started introducing SaaS. And I read the Phoenix Project. Because of that, we started to move everything into products. So I used the culture to change culture, so new organization structures, new processes, new roles, and teams that did both. And because of that, we stabilized IT, and we accelerated the rate of change, until finally, IT became a trusted partner with happier customers and happier employees. Isn't that what everybody wants as a story? And it's really great, because I love, this is one of our staple things. I'm sure every Christmas you guys have a staple film that you all watch. Ours just happens to be now 6 3-hour-long films around The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and everything. But this was really great because, what was the vision of the Fellowship of the Ring? The vision was to save Middle-earth. The mission was to stop Dark Lord Sauron from taking over Middle-earth. The objective was to take that ring and put it in the fire of Mount Doom. And the KPI was 100% of that ring melted in the fire of Mount Doom before Sauron destroyed the planet. Right? Really flipping simple. And did they sit down and create a requirements document, create a big Gantt chart of how they're going to get from A to B? No, they knew what they had to do. They were a diverse, multi-skilled team, a multifunctional team. I can't believe I'm going this far down this road now. And as a result, they all kind of had to bond very quickly, trust each other very quickly, and they all ended up splitting up. And there were times when I'm sure Legolas was sat there thinking, I have no idea if Frodo's anywhere near that mountain, and I've got about another million flipping orcs turning up at me, and Gimli's stood there saying, let's have our competition of how many orcs we can kill before, and killing mammoths and all that sort of stuff. But they had this thing around, they knew what they were good at, right? They all had their own individual characteristics. And a guy called Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, talks about the hedgehog concept. And that hedgehog concept is, do what you're passionate about, do what you're best at, and do what really drives your economic indicator. So your profit per, your transaction per, employee per visit per whatever. And he did that by finding something like 11 companies out of 1,500 companies that were beating the market by 15 times or more. So, he found that all of them had this kind of focus on what they were good at. There's also this thing about, alignment and autonomy. And this comes from kind of the Spotify engineering model, which is, the goal here is to have high alignment and high autonomy. So, if you've got this position of harmony, you're kind of saying, well, the boss is saying, I need to cross a river. And the team collectively says, let's build a bridge. It's not him telling the team to build a bridge. It's the team coming up with the answer themselves. And, having all of that really clearly laid out in terms of vision, mission, outcomes, objectives, and key results. How do you connect that all together? How does the person, every person in the organization know how they are contributing to the company's goals? And leadership is really important. I've got a picture of William Wallace here, but kind of, facilitating that environment where you are the gardener, you're the facilitator of your teams. And, there's multiple levels of leadership, and again, this comes from Jim Collins and the Harvard Business Review. And most of what you see in terms of leadership are kind of, people who can get people behind a vision, maybe set some objectives, run a department. But there's something more than that. The really effective leaders have this thing around being able to do all of that plus have this paradoxical combination of personal humility and professional will. And those two things are really, really powerful. You know, for a leader to say, do you know what, I don't know. Do you know what, I've made a mistake. Do you know what do you think? You know, not being so hung up on themselves. And when things go wrong, they go, whoa, whoa, that's my fault. And when things go really well, they go, well done, guys, you know? And I've been in so many conferences where I've, you know, heard the leader saying, do you know, if this goes really well, guys, this is my idea, and if it's all yours, it's all your fault at the back. It's the wrong way. It's the wrong way around. It's like, you know, if this goes wrong, I take full responsibility, but if it's right, well done, guys, you know? And then the other part of that is that professional will. In the book Scrum by Sutherland, he's one of the founders of kind of Agile and everything, he says people want a transcendent purpose. It isn't just a case of I want to come to work to do my job. And this kind of links to the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the top. It's like, I want to be part of something much bigger than myself. And leaders who are there just not just to get their bonus or to meet their objectives and make their next boss happy, but they're actually there to build a legacy. I'm just reading the book by about the All Blacks by James Kerr, which is all about the All Blacks, and it's called Legacy. And we all want to leave, you know, the organization or whatever we're doing, and when we get to the kind of time when, you know, we're on the golf course, I could say worse things, but whatever we're doing at the latter end of our life, we want to look back and say, do you know what, I made a difference. You know, I've you know, had a family, and you know, you tick off the big things of your life, and, you know, you don't want to say, do you know, I just worked for this guy all my life, or these people all my life, and, you know, you want to say, well, I delivered something positive. I did something much bigger with my life that contributed to society, to the world, etc. And you know, I think it's not just leaders, but all of us need that kind of sense. And the State of DevOps report, and these guys do so many surveys of all different industries. They've got 30,000 different, you know, survey responses now. They've collected that over 5 years. And one of the key things is leadership is really important. People who have a vision, who can stimulate their organizations intellectually, and, you know, when you read the stuff around Google and Netflix and all that kind of stuff, it's really inspiring to see how they, you know, challenge people and how they have hack days and all that sort of stuff. They can communicate, you know, and inspire people to really get behind the vision, not in a way that's kind of fake, but in a way that's authentic. You know, people really believe in them. They're really, because they have that transcendent purpose. It's not just about, I just want this job doing, you know? It's about something much bigger. And then they have this whole real empathetic kind of interconnectivity with their teams. So they support their people and they recognize people. Even just simple thank yous or well dones. It doesn't always have to be a bonus or a pay rise or whatever, although they're really nice as well. And, you know, again, the State of DevOps uses the Westrum's Topology for culture, and Westrum talks about this in terms of safety culture. And he's kind of found 3 different types of culture in organizations. The pathological one, so this is where you have the tyranny, you have the dictator, it's my way, the highway, and if you're a messenger with some bad news, you're out. You've got your bureaucratic, which is all about your rules, it's all about people getting together and making decisions. Anybody with bad news, it's like, well, we don't want to hear that, you know, and you know, novelty. Well, if you're breaking my process, that's not that good. I'm going to have to work out how that fits with the process. And particularly around failure and stuff like that, it's like, you know, whose fault was that? That's the kind of language we see. But these organizations that have high performance, they have high cooperation. They like bridging. They don't mind people from one department talking to another. They promote that kind of, you know, teamwork. Failure leads to inquiry. I mean, there's a book called Rising Strong by Brené Brown, and she says the fastest way to learn is to fail. Is when we fail, we learn something, and that learning sticks with us. And novelty is implemented. You know, we like the good ideas because, you know, if you go, you know, to places like Google, they do thousands and thousands of innovations. Only one of them has to turn up and make money. You know, not all of them have to. Some of them can die. And it's interesting then, what you see from, you know, some of those, you know, organizations then is much more, you know, deployment, faster lead time for changes, faster recovery from incidents. This is against low performers, lower change rate. This is the 2018 report, by the way. But most importantly, the business is twice as likely to achieve its goals. And that's the thing, you know, the goal of every business is, it is to serve the community, to do what they're doing, to deliver the products and services they do. But the ultimate goal of every business is to make some money, to create shareholder value. And you go to work, I know you love your jobs, you know, we all love our jobs, but actually if it didn't pay us, you know, we probably wouldn't do that job. And one of the things that I had to focus a lot of time on, you know, I spent a lot of time in meetings doing lots of other stuff, and when I took this on, the focus all became about my teams. I had to create that safe environment for the teams. And I really love the Avengers stuff, because if you look at all those people individually, you know, Hulk and Iron Man and Thor and all the other people, they're proper dysfunctional together, aren't they? There's no way that team should ever work. You know, they're all kind of super egos and, you know, with their own special powers. But when they came together, you know, when you've watched the films and stuff like that, and, you know, the overwhelming situations that they found themselves in, it was the diversity that really helped. They learned to kind of bring out the strengths of that diverse team. And, you know, in order to do that, to create that kind of bond between the team, you need to start thinking about the people in a different way, right? And this is all about systems thinking and all that sort of stuff, where actually, when you go back to 1911, you go back to the Industrial Revolution, you go to all the stuff that Toyota did and all that, they created production lines. They created silos. And those silos were to help complicated work, like a car, move from one stage to another. And that's how they got like semi-skilled workers to be able to do kind of skilled work in a consistent and repeatable fashion by creating a siloed organization. And complicated work, although, you know, the Lego Millennium Falcon is quite complicated, as long as you follow the pictures, and like my 10-year-old son did this, you can build it in 3 or 4 hours. And you can build the next one exactly the same, and again. But we're in an environment of knowledge workers, you know. We are not manual workers. You know, a lot of what we do comes in our mind, and we deal with complex work. We have to take feedback from all over the place. What we do today and what we do tomorrow is different to what we did yesterday and the day before. So, you know, we're dealing with complex work. In manual workers, you need a level 4 leader. You don't really need level 5. You just need somebody who knows what they need to do and who needs to do it and follow a set of processes. The system comes first. And in level 5 leadership, you need to start thinking about, well, who do I need? Then what do I do? And, you know, create that environment where we can be great and be able to pivot our strategy based on what the market demands. And this kind of leads into some of the difference between kind of Darwinian thinking and Einstein thinking. You know, there's this whole thing about deterministic and non-deterministic sciences. And the stuff on the right-hand side handles this thing called uncertainty so much better than the stuff on the left. The stuff on the left is all about predictability, doing the same thing over and over again to the same standards. The stuff on the right is like, we don't really know. We're working this out all the time. And that's why people like Eric Ries talk about creating a learning environment. If you can measure one thing, it's the rate of organizational learning. And it doesn't matter whether you're learning as a business or learning as a leader. It's also, you know, technology is changing all the time, and we just heard that this morning. How are we keeping up with the changes in everything that's around us? Manual workers are very much driven by the whole Taylor scientific management that went into the whole work of kind of Deming and Ahono and all of those people. And it's very much about, you know, there's a really great quote from him I'll come on to in a minute, which is the system is first. And Drucker turned around like 40 years later and said, no, it's the productivity of the knowledge worker that's more important. And there's a great book called Peopleware. Anybody read Peopleware? Great book, because it's all about coding. It's all about software developers. It was written in 1985, and it was talking about, it even went down to what level of decibel noise is appropriate for a developer to work in, and how much space should they have, you know, cubic. He did all the experiments to find out what was the most productive environment for a software developer. Siloed working versus collaborative working, and this is all enhanced by the process. Knowledge work is all enhanced by the environment. And these are the quotes, you know, Frederick Winslow Taylor said, in the past it's been man, in the future it must be the system. And that's why when you go into most organizations, they talk about the process, they talk about their silos, they talk about that sort of stuff. And, Drucker turned around and said, actually, the most important thing now is the knowledge workers and their productivity. And creating that environment and protecting that is of extreme importance. So I took all of that and said, right, do you know what? I'm going to create new teams. I'm going to have a product owner. And that product owner isn't just a requirements gatherer, a pseudo kind of customer person, but they're fully accountable for the value of the product, both build and operate. They ran the P&L, they ran the service, and then they delivered change. We had a policy, service is king, change is queen. Fix the service first, then follow up with the change. So if we had a Sev 1 or we had a big backlog of incidents, fix them first. And there's an incentive I gave the team in a minute, I'll tell you about, and then focus on the new value and the things. And it got to the point where I said to the teams, look, if you get to 0 incidents in your queues and you send me a screenshot, I'll buy the team a cake. It cost me a fortune in cake. And then one of my team realized that actually if she baked the cakes, she'd make a bucket load of money out of it. So I was funding one of my team members to bake cakes every time one of my teams got to 0 incidents, which was quite fun. The product technical lead, so again, focused on quality for build and operate. So it didn't matter whether it was a defect, a Sev 2, Sev 1, whatever, or whether it was new features, they'd be kind of overseeing the quality. The delivery lead, so we didn't call them Scrum Master or Agile Coach or anything, because they needed to know Scrum, Waterfall, Kanban, the whole shebang, and apply the things appropriately, because they all have a place for different types of work. We had product analysts who would then bridge between what the product owner was saying, what the customers wanted, and translate that into a language that the product engineers could understand. So basically story writing and acceptance criteria and all that sort of stuff. The engineers, we didn't differentiate them between dev, test, QA, whatever. They were the engineers. And we had 3 levels of engineers depending on, how much experience you had and whether you were coaching others or not and all that sort of stuff. And then we had the juniors of the team. I don't know how Hulk became a junior, but hey. So the product administrators were your graduates, your apprentices. They'd come in and they'd learn the ropes. They'd do a bit of testing, do a bit of triaging, and then eventually, we'd skill them up to become the product engineers. And engineers sometimes ended up becoming analysts or delivery leads or technical leads, and the analysts typically then ended up becoming product owners. So we ended up with that. There's no way I've only got 10 minutes left. Right, shield. So Thor's got his hammer, Captain America's got shield, Lara Croft has got the bow or maybe the guns, whichever way you want to go with it. Ronaldo has a football, Picasso has a paintbrush. Would you give the wrong person the wrong tools to do their job? No. Do organizations give their technology teams the tools to do their job, which may not be right? Yes. So a big part of this is, although you want some consistency, you might want to leverage license agreements and all that kind of stuff, let your teams have the right tools for their jobs. And give them the right environment. So if you took Superman, he's in Krypton, that's his place, isn't it? Right, so he's in Krypton, and he can't do anything, he's just a normal person, right? You stick him on Earth with our sun, and oh my goodness, he's got superpowers. There's a great quote from a book called Powerful, Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility. It's the Netflix book by McCord. And she says, people have power, don't take it away. It's a bit like Jim Collins says, you don't need to motivate people. The challenge for leaders is not to demotivate them. So create that environment. And that environment is moving from time, cost, and scope to value, flow, and quality. What's the most invaluable thing that you need? Create a flow where you're consistently delivering that, multiple deployments a day or whatever it is, or multiple story points, whatever that measure is, that continuous indefinite flow of work where you're optimizing that flow, you're looking at constraints, you're looking at bottlenecks, you're automating, you're kind of making the whole process of flow better, and everything has quality built in. The Andon cord of Toyota stops 3,000 times a day on a production line to stop defects going down to the next level. And if we focus on those things over the traditional project management scope, cost, and time, we're much more likely to deliver success. And then the key thing then is to practice that. So, there's a really great video in one of my articles, which is about Yoda teaching Luke Skywalker to lift whatever the ship is called, the spaceship, out of the swamp. And, eventually Luke says, I can't do this. This is too hard. It's too big. And then Yoda says something like, you think size matters? And then he lifts it out and moves it, which is pretty impressive. But this is all about practicing, giving yourself time to master your art. So, whether you've got the roles, the artifacts of pipelines, backlogs, your processes of Scrum, Kanban, etc., having WIP limits, story points, velocities, the right measures, the right ceremonies in terms of stand-up, sprint plan, all of these become routine. They just become part of the fabric of who you are. You don't have to think about these. Your monitoring capabilities, your improvement, your retrospectives, and then, when you've done your retrospectives, how many people take something from the retrospective and add it to the backlog and get it done like everything else? Once you've done this, it's a bit like Barack Obama. He's only got 2 colored suits, gray and blue. That's it. He doesn't have to think about that. He has to stop. He can unconsciously just pick out a suit and wear it. We need to get to the point where this is unconscious. We're just doing this. This is just part of who we are every day. So our focus then is on delivering the value rather than thinking about, what am I meant to be doing today? And Gene Kim talks about the 3 ways. And he talks about systems thinking all the way from idea to value. That's why maybe it's not just dev and ops. It's biz, dev, sec, QA, ops, user, all at the other end. And then creating that feedback loop that says, well, what's happening? What is the user feeling? What benefit are we getting? Are these features being used, not being used? Which ones do they like? Which ones do we want more of? Which ones are fast? Which ones are slow? And then, iterating through that. And then having this 3rd way of continual experimentation and learning. I might come into land in a minute, actually. And it's really important. Most of you should know this, the Agile Manifesto. It's all about kind of individuals and working software and collaboration over processes and contract negotiation. The interesting thing is, if you look at all the stuff about Industrial Revolution and Taylor and the Toyota way and all that kind of stuff, the Toyota way and stuff is very much about the right-hand side. All the stuff that we talk about, knowledge and knowledge work and culture, is all the stuff on the left-hand side. So it's really interesting that although that stuff's really important, we should not, theory of constraints is super important. Total systems thinking is super important. But creating the right environment in which we deliver software is even more important. I'm not going to go through this. So, again, this is Scrum by Sutherland. He talks about like 11 steps to go through, and it's a really good book, and it's the steps that I pretty much took. And, we had a number of practices around sprint reviews and daily stand-ups and things like that. Huge amount of kind of building trust in the organization, building that situational awareness, and everybody aligned to the common goals. And we measured a whole bunch of stuff. Now, we measured stuff and it was wrong, and we measured stuff. We need to measure the stuff that drives improvement. And Eric Ries talks about actionable metrics versus vanity metrics. And there was a huge amount of vanity metrics in our organization. These are the things that we focused on that actually drove improvement. And we all know, we've all been in the environment where we just know that the project's going to fail. We just know that this is, why are we doing this? This is somebody trying to save face. Or, I think there's a problem here, but nobody flipping listens to me. Having an organization that confronts those brutal truths is really, really important. And then there's Kryptonite. So there's a whole stuff that kills DevOps. So things like, Agile equals DevOps. We can't do DevOps. We're unique. DevOps is a buzzword. You kind of avoid all that sort of stuff. And then finally, when you put all of this together, when you're able to kind of, just park the word DevOps for a minute, but if you can create software that is stable, that can be deployed onto multiple different devices, different user interfaces, and you can center all of that stuff with all of the kind of artificial intelligence and lean machine learning, internet data, social data, your organization's data, and you focus that on a person, in this case, Iron Man, with his suit. He did 42 versions of the suit, so he's super DevOps. And he ran and built his suits, which is pretty awesome as well. So Iron Man is the ultimate DevOps hero, I think. When you center all of that on the user, that's digital transformation. When you put in the person who's going to be using the technology in the middle, that's all digital transformation is. So if you want to know more, we have an academy, so the DevOps Group Academy, where we have certifications in Agile and DevOps and things like that. As Steve said at the beginning on the video, we're hiring, so if anybody wants a job and join this funky band of people, We're hiring. And then we've got a webinar to do with cloud and cloud migrations on the 18th of October. So sign up for that and join up. And finally, a thank you to the organisers for this amazing event. Right, any questions? Maybe I should throw this and the person has to answer a question. No questions? Ed?
If there was one thing...
I'm going to throw this because you're going to have to put your laptop down.
If there was one thing you wish you knew when you started off on this journey, that you could, one bit of advice you could give to Raj of 3 years ago, what would it be?
I think that it's a simple one, really. It's like, this is going to take time and it's going to be hard, and just go with it. Just trust your instincts and keep going. And when things get bad, know that they'll get better. That's it. I'd give Raj 3 years ago a hug as well. Oh, flipping heck, it was hard times. Yeah. Anybody else? Question? Right.
Sorry. Thank you. So one of the challenges is with trying to adopt DevOps culture is culture change, managing upwards, and getting the leadership of the business to come around to that idea.
Yeah.
So we're trying it in our IT team. We're pushing ahead, but we find the rest of the business struggles to adopt that. What advice do you have for trying to change upwards or trying to change the business culture, and what point, dare I say it, do you stop and move on if that doesn't happen?
It's a hard thing because many leaders have spent most of their careers getting to where they've got to. And most senior leaders, including myself 3 years ago, didn't like to be told what to do. And, my development conversation with my boss were, I don't need to learn anymore. I mean, it's so naive and so arrogant, actually, looking back at it. I tell my former self to stop being so arrogant, And that's a challenge. If the teams are saying, look, boss, we need to change, it doesn't work. It has to be the peer group. It has to be their peers. And a big part of me joining DevOps Group is to be able to speak into those leaders. Because I know them. I've been in their shoes. I've lived their lives. And to say to them, it's all right to be vulnerable right now. It's all right. This organization here has done some of this sort of stuff. And oh my goodness, look at the results that they're getting. Wouldn't you like to have some of those results? And they go, yeah, I want some of that. How do you bring IT and the business together? And all right, okay, well, we need to go through a journey. Because I think too much of DevOps is focused on the engineer and the environments that they're working in and technology. Nobody's looking at the poor leaders who go, I have no idea. But there are more and more leaders out there, and particularly in the role that I've had in the last 2 months, where I've been meeting clients and people in the industry, where the leaders are saying, we need to change. And they're going wholeheartedly to customer-focused, outcome-based organizational operating models and structures, where actually they're more ahead than the people in the teams. And I think that will come, I think more and more of that peer pressure, and you just read the news every day, there's yet another IT failure here or a data hack here or something. People are going to realize, actually, we need to do something different. Our old ways are not working. So my advice would be just keep that message going, and it'll either hit them through yourself and through your teams, or it'll hit them through their peer group. But at some point, somebody said that if the CIO, CTOs don't change, they will not have a job in 5 years' time. Any other questions? Right. Okay. Are we on time there? Yeah? Oh, super. Look at that. I knew that. Right, thank you.